Corinth was an ancient Greek city-state, a polis that still exists today, though modern Corinth is located about 5 kilometers from the ruins of the ancient city. The ancient city of Corinth was situated approximately 48 kilometers west of Athens and was notorious for its reputation of indulgence. Additionally, the city was known for hosting the Isthmian Games, a biennial tournament held in honor of Poseidon, the god of the sea, similar to the Olympic Games we know today. The competitions included chariot races, boxing, discus throwing, and even a musical contest open to participants of both sexes. Corinth is also mentioned in the New Testament of the Bible, as the Apostle Paul visited the city, founded a Christian church, and wrote letters known as Corinthians. It is possible that in 1882, Lane Jackson was inspired by the name of this city when founding the Corinthian Football Club. The football club was widely regarded as the greatest amateur team of all time and captivated the football world in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The team embarked on exhibition tours around the globe, one of which took place in Brazil. During this visit in 1910, Corinthian played a series of impressive matches. They defeated the Rio de Janeiro champions Fluminense 10-1, beat a team of local players from Rio de Janeiro 8-1, and overcame a mixed team of Botafogo and Vasco players 5-2. When they arrived in Sao Paulo, they faced the Associação Atlética das Palmeiras, winning 2-0. In this match, some workers from Bom Retiro were captivated by the football played by the English team. Already fascinated by football, Anselmo Correa, Antonio Pereira, Carlos Silva, Joaquim Ambrosio, and Rafael Peroni decided, on September 1, 1910, at 8:30 p.m. on a Thursday, to found Sport Club Corinthians Paulista. The meeting took place at the corner of José Paulino and Canigo Martin streets. At this inaugural meeting, which marked the creation of Timo, the first members and founding partners were chosen. Miguel Battaglia, a tailor by profession, was elected as the club's first president and declared, "Corinthians will be the people's team, and it is the people who will make the team." On José Paulino Street itself, a plot of land was rented on September 14 for Corinthians' first training sessions, under the watchful eyes of the people of Sao Paulo. Just as the Church of Sao Paulo was founded in Corinth, Corinthians was born in the city of Sao Paulo. Even before the rental, on September 10, just 9 days after its founding, the team played its first match against União de Lapa. Although Lapa, a team from the old Várzea, floodplain, of Sao Paulo, won 1-0, the real triumph was the dream of the Bom Retiro workers. It didn't take long for Timo's first victory to arrive. On September 14, Corinthians defeated Estrela Polar 2-0. Forward Luis Fabi scored the first goal, and Jorge Campbell added the second, but it was the Italian who made history as the scorer of Corinthians' first ever goal. The match was held at the Linheiro Field, on the old Rua dos Imigrantes, right in Bom Retiro. The team's first away match was against Ponte Preta in Campinas, ending with a 1-0 victory for Corinthians. Until 1913, Corinthians played in the Várzeas of Sao Paulo, but that year they made their debut in the Campeonato Paulista, finishing 4th out of 5 teams. It didn't take long for the first title to come. In 1914, Corinthians won the Campeonato Paulista undefeated, with 10 victories in 10 matches and 37 goals scored. The team secured the title in advance by defeating Campos Elíseos 4-0, and in the final round, they beat Lusitano 3-0. In this championship, forward Nico stood out as the first top scorer of an official competition wearing the Corinthians jersey. One of the club's first stadiums was Ponte Grande, located where Ponte das Bandeiras now stands, on the marginal teat. The first title against Palmeiras, which would become our great rival and was known at the time as Palestra Italia, was won in the Torneo Inicio of 1919, with a 1-0 victory at Parque Antarctica, thanks to a goal by right-winger Americo. In 1924, Corinthians achieved its first three-peat in the Campeonato Paulista. The sequence of titles began in 1922, the year of the centenary of independence, followed by the back-to-back championship in 1923, and culminated with a 1-0 victory over Paulistano in 1924, securing the treble. In 1926, Corinthians acquired the Parque São Jorge land, which was renovated and reopened with a grand celebration in 1928. The same year the club also won the Campeonato Paulista. The following year, after a 3-1 victory over Barracas from Argentina in Timo's first international match held at Parque São Jorge, journalist Thomas Mazzoni of a Gazeta praised the team's musketeer spirit. Thus, the Corinthians mascot was born. In 1931, players Del Debbio, Philo, Reto, and De Maria made headlines as they transferred from Corinthians to the Italian club Lazio in a significant international transaction between America and Europe. During this period, Pedro Mazzulo, known as the Uruguayan, became Corinthians' first paid coach. In 1934, a player who would become one of the club's great idols emerged, Tellico from Parana. In 1936, Corinthians had an incredible season, going unbeaten with 28 victories and 3 draws, including friendlies. The unbeaten streak was only broken in 1937 in the final of the Campeonato Paulista against Palmeiras, the champions of the second round. However, Corinthians secured its second three-peat in the Campeonato Paulista in 1939, with Tellico shining throughout these competitions. On April 28, 1940, Corinthians inaugurated the Pacaembu Stadium with a 4-2 victory over Atlético Mineiro. The following year, Tellico was the top scorer of the Campeonato Paulista for the 5th time, leading Corinthians to the title with a 3-2 victory over Santos at Vila Belmiro. In the clashes between the two black and white teams, Corinthians historically holds a significant advantage and was the protagonist of the biggest blowout in the classic matchups between them. In the 1940s, Corinthians was marked by regional achievements and the emergence of idols such as Cabacao, Dario, Roberto, and Luisinho. In 1950, the club won its first Rio São Paulo tournament title by defeating Botafogo at Pacaembu. In 1951, after a decade-long wait, Corinthians once again lifted the Campeonato Paulista trophy, powered by a formidable attack comprising Claudio, Luisinho, Baltazar, Mario, and Carbone, who collectively scored 103 goals in 30 matches. That year, Corinthians also played its first international match, defeating a Uruguayan team 4-1 in Montevideo, buoyed by their success abroad. In 1952, the team embarked on a European tour, visiting countries such as Turkey, Denmark, and Finland, where they achieved 12 victories, 3 draws, and suffered only 1 loss. In 1953, Corinthians claimed their first international title by winning the Small World Cup, facing teams like Barcelona, Roma, and the Caracas national team, as well as securing their second Rio São Paulo tournament. In 1954, the year marking the 4th centenary of São Paulo's founding, Corinthians celebrated another Campeonato Paulista title, one of the most coveted in the club's history. In 1955, Timão won the Charles Miller International Tournament by defeating the prestigious Benfica 2-1. During this period, Corinthians also contributed players to the Brazilian national team, such as goalkeeper Gilmar and left-back Orico, who helped Brazil win its first World Cup in 1958. Shortly thereafter, the iconic Vicente Mateus assumed the presidency of Corinthians. The 1960s were challenging for the club, particularly during a time when Pelé was dazzling the world with Santos. However, the signing of Rivellino in 1965 stood out as a major highlight of the decade. In 1968, Rivellino played a crucial role in helping Corinthians end an 11-year drought without victories over Santos, with goals scored by Paulo Borges and Flavio. The year 1969 brought a period of mourning for Corinthians. At the end of April, after a 1-1 draw against São Bento and Sorocaba, players Eduardo, a left winger, and Lidu, a right back, went for dinner in the Santana neighborhood. After the meal, Lidu, who had just received his driver's license, was involved in a car accident when his Volkswagen Beetle crashed into one of the pillars of the Vila Maria Bridge and overturned on the marginal teat. Lidu, just 20 years old, and Eduardo, 24, were thrown from the vehicle and died at the scene. The loss deeply affected the team, which expressed its grief in subsequent matches. After the accident, Corinthians requested that the São Paulo Football Federation register 2 new players to replace them during the championship. The proposal required unanimous approval from all Paulista clubs, but only Palmeiras refused. Delfino Facchina, then president of Palmeiras, was approached by Corinthians president Wadi Helyouth, who, due to this episode, earned the nickname Acirito de Porco, spoilsport, a phrase that endures to this day, even though Palmeiras' current mascot seeks to distance itself from this past. In the 1977 season, Corinthians had a competitive performance, but the long-awaited title drought was finally broken after 22 years, 8 months, and 7 days. The team won the Campeonato Paulista with a 1-0 victory over Ponte Preta, thanks to a goal by Basilio in the final. The previous year, Corinthians experienced a historic moment in football, the Corinthians invasion. In a match at the Maracana, Corinthians drew 1-1 with Fluminense and won 4-1 on penalties. The Corinthians fans filled the stadium, making the Maracana feel like an extension of Corinthians' home. According to the club's official website, around 80,000 Corinthians fans were present, with approximately 70,000 of them inside the stadium. In 1978, Corinthians welcomed the arrival of Socrates, Biro, and Amaral. Socrates, known as the Doctor, and Casagrande played key roles in the Corinthian democracy movement, which emerged after the departure of President Vicente Mateus and lasted until 1985. Zenon, Zé Maria, and Vladimir were also important figures in this movement. In the late 1980s, the signing of Neto was crucial for Corinthians' success in the following decade. In 1990, the team won its first Brazilian championship title by defeating São Paulo in the final. In 1995, the team won the Copa do Brasil, adding another trophy to its collection. In 1998 and 1999, Corinthians won the Brazilian Championship in consecutive years, with Vanderlei Luxemburgo in 1998 and Osvaldo de Oliveira in 1999. In 2000, the club achieved its first world title by defeating Vasco on penalties at the Maracana. On the road to the final, Corinthians beat Raja Casablanca and Al Nassr, drew with Real Madrid at the Morumbi, and finished first in the group, with Edilson Capetinha standing out as the best player. In 2002, Corinthians won the Copa do Brasil for the second time, defeating Brasiliense in the final, with a 2-1 victory in the first leg and a 1-1 draw in the second leg. In 2005, Corinthians secured their fourth Brazilian championship title, with Carlitos Tevez standing out by scoring 20 goals. At the time, club president Alberto Dualib had formed a partnership with MSI, led by Kia Jorabikian. This agreement gave Media Sports Investments control over the football department for 10 years, including contract negotiations, but the partnership didn't last long. By 2006, Corinthians' situation had worsened. Instead of being featured in sports pages, the club found itself embroiled in scandals and disputes with Kia Jorabikian and the management, culminating in their defeat by River Plate in the Copa Libertadores. The crisis led to fan protests, and the club began to breach contract clauses, while MSI stopped their investments. Additionally, Corinthians became involved in a money laundering scheme, with Kia Jorabikian and Boris Berezovsky of MSI fleeing to London, leaving the club with a debt of 90 million reais. This situation contributed to Corinthians' first and only relegation in their history in 2007. In 2009, Corinthians made one of the most significant signings in Brazilian football history by bringing Ronaldo Fenomeno to the club. Despite concerns about his physical condition due to weight and injuries, Ronaldo proved that his talent went beyond these issues. With his help, Corinthians won both the Paulista Championship and the Copa do Brasil that year, defeating Internacional from Porto Alegre with a 2-0 victory at Pacaembu and a 2-2 draw in the return leg in Porto Alegre. The club's centenary was celebrated with a grand event at Anhangaba. Although 2010 didn't bring new titles, it marked Ronaldo's retirement, with his final goal being a farewell moment. His arrival at Corinthians elevated the club's status, and after his departure, Corinthians continued to achieve new successes. In 2011, Corinthians claimed their fifth Brazilian championship title with a remarkable campaign: 21 wins, 8 draws, and 9 losses. Coach Adener, better known as Tite, is regarded as one of the greatest managers in the club's history. While figures like Oswaldo Brandão and Vanderlei Luxemburgo also contributed to Corinthians' success, it was Tite who led the team to the most significant title in its history during a period of intense technical changes. The Libertadores win was marked by the immersive and characteristic way Corinthians captures titles. The team excelled in the group stage, finishing as leaders with 4 wins and 2 draws, ahead of Cruz Azul, Mexico, Nacional, and Deportivo Táchira. In the round of 16, they eliminated Emelec, Ecuador, faced Vasco in the quarterfinals, and defeated Santos in the semifinals. In the final against Boca Juniors, Corinthians drew the first leg at La Bombonera with a goal from Romarinho and secured the title with a 2-0 victory at Pacaembu, with 2 goals from Sheik. The team won the Libertadores undefeated, further solidifying their legacy. The year 2012 brought another significant achievement for Corinthians, the Club World Cup in Japan. The team began their journey by defeating Al Ahly and advanced to the final against Chelsea, who had recently won their first Champions League title. Corinthians won 1-0 against Al Ahly, with a goal from Guerreiro, in a match remembered for the massive presence of their fans. The Yokohama Stadium hosted 68,275 spectators, but it's estimated that over 45,000 Corinthians fans were present, creating a true invasion. The semi-final match also saw an impressive number of supporters, tripling the attendance of the previous semi-final. Many fans were so passionate that they sold properties and cars to follow Corinthians across the world. Goalkeeper Cassio delivered decisive performances and was named the best player of the tournament, with impressive saves that secured the title for Corinthians. This success is part of a rich history of goalkeepers at the club, beginning with Valente, the first goalkeeper in Corinthians history, through to Edu, considered by some even better than Felix, the goalkeeper of the 1970 World Cup. The iconic Tobias, part of the Corinthians invasion of '76 and the end of the title drought in '77, and the Black Panther Jairo, who set a record of 1,131 minutes without conceding a goal, are also remembered with distinction. Ronaldo Giovanelli, one of the most iconic goalkeepers in Corinthians history, and Dida, a football giant who shone at Milan with stunning saves, are memorable figures at the club. However, Cassio also stands out as a Corinthians legend. After his decisive performances, he was instrumental in winning the Brazilian titles in 2015, with Tite's return, and in 2017, under Fabio Carril's leadership. Additionally, Cassio helped Corinthians win the Paulista Championship 3 times in a row, in 2017, 2018, and 2019, writing important chapters in the club's history. In 2014, Corinthians inaugurated a modern stadium with a capacity of 49,205 spectators, designed to host the World Cup. But that's a story for another time. Stay tuned and follow the thrilling journeys of our Timao.